Morning again, everybody, and welcome to Understanding the Role of Play in Pre-K to Grade 2 classrooms, or I think we also used in early elementary classrooms. That is the session that we will be presenting. Hopefully you're in the right session. If for some reason you determine this is not the right session, it will not offend us at all if you need to switch gears. But we are thrilled to have all of you with us this morning and very excited to get to know each other over the course of the next 2.5 hours. So to kick things off, our team here is going to do just a quick round of introductions. And then we will be asking you to introduce yourselves in the chat box. So I'm going to set that up before we introduce ourselves. Morning. Because that will give you a second to kind of think about it. If you are by yourself in your own space, you can introduce yourself. And if you are in a team sitting together in a classroom space, just have someone from your school system introduce you. Would be great for us to know what your position is. Are you a classroom teacher? Are you an administrator? Are you a curriculum leader? Are you a special educator? It's lovely for us to know our audience. So I am Leanne Larson. I am the Director of Early Learning in Maine's Department of Education. The Early Learning team is part of our larger Office of Teaching and Learning. And we are the team that focuses on pre-K through the early elementary years. It's where public pre-K is based. It's where our Head Start Collab office is. And we do a lot of projects that support the K-2 or K-3 span. And I'm going to pass it over to Nicole.
Thanks, Leanne. Good morning, everybody. My name is Nicole Medor. I'm the Early Childhood Specialist at the Department of Education, and I also work on the Early Learning team that Leanne just described. And we also have my colleague, Renee. Oops, sorry about that.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning, everyone. I'm so glad you're here. Thank you for joining us.
We have some echo in the room that we attempted to fix, but apparently may or may not. We're going to move on.
All right. So if you could take just a moment and in the chat box, go ahead and introduce yourselves to us. And I'll just say that Renee is our preschool development grant manager on the early learning team. And we're glad to have her. And we also have one person who is joining us in person here at the University of Maine. Can you just remind me?
Victoria Judkins, special ed.
Great. So her name is Victoria Judkins, and she is a special educator. And when we get to breakout rooms, we're going to figure out how to loop her in with at least one of the other groups. So she'll have some other folks to talk with this morning. And I'm seeing lots of wonderful early learning educators popping up on the screen. We've got teachers, we've got special educators, we've got ed techs, we have got some administrators, and we are ranging all over the state from as far down south, I think I've noticed, as RSU 57, all the way over into down East Maine. And I think we even have some folks from the county who are joining us today. So that is awesome. It is wonderful to see all of you. And even some students, pre-service students, and folks from Halifax, Nova Scotia. Woohoo! Well, welcome. Glad to have you with us. All right. Well, we are going to go ahead and kick off our session today. So this is the first of 3 different sessions that we are going to be providing over the course of the year through this mechanism, the Engagement Regional Professional Learning Sessions. We'll talk about this more toward the end of today's session, but we are also planning to have some learning opportunities on this topic of playful learning in between the sessions. So Today, because this is a three-part series, we are going to dive into the why of play-based learning and the research around playful learning. When we meet again in January, that session is going to be more focused on the how of playful learning. What are some concrete strategies that you can embed in your classrooms to encourage playful learning? And then in our third session, we're going to be talking about a couple of things. We're going to be thinking about how can play be used as a vehicle for assessing student learning, and also how do you encourage a stronger culture of playful learning within your school. So hopefully that gives you a little bit of an idea of where we're headed for in our time together over the course of the year. So today we're going to jump in to the why of play-based learning. And this is a question that I will say sometimes we get asked in our team, but we are hopeful that by the end of today, you're going to be able to answer that question a little bit more readily for yourselves. But just to get our juices going as we talk about the why of play-based learning, we're going to get you engaged in an activity right off the bat. And we're hoping that all of you got our instructions ahead of today and brought with you a few materials that you might be able to use that you can engage in that are playful. If for some reason you weren't able to grab some Play-Doh or pipe cleaners or blocks or something like that, if you even just have some paper and some colored pencils or crayons or markers nearby, that will work too. Whatever you have at your disposal. But what we're going to ask you to do first is to think of a moment when you experience being a playful learner. So take yourselves back in your memory banks and think about a time when you were engaging in something that you would consider to be play or playful, a playful experience. And then we invite you to use the materials that you have at your disposal to represent that experience. So the best that you can, try to make a representation of that playful learning experience. We're going to give you probably 3 or 4 minutes to create your representation. And then we're going to be splitting you into some breakout rooms if you are singletons on the screen, or if you're in your bigger space, we'll invite you to share with a partner who's nearby. So just so you know that that will be coming up. If you are together with others this morning, feel free to visit with each other, talk with each other as you're creating your representation. It's 9:16, and we will give you until about 9:20 to create your representation. All right. So I was looking around the best that I can from my vantage point as you all were creating, and I was noticing some conversation happening. I was also noticing some smiles on people's faces, which I was really glad to see. Um, what we'd like you to do next is you were in it. And we're going to move you into some breakout spaces. Or if you are already with the team, then we're going to invite you to take a few minutes with a partner. So if you're in a large group with maybe, let's say, 8 people, just form some partnerships or some trios and go ahead and quickly share your representation. Just tell very briefly what you represented and then share what that made you feel like. And then we will come back together in about 5 minutes. And Renee is going to open up the breakout spaces for you if you need to be joining others virtually. Okay. And obviously, if you are in a big room, even if you see a room pop up, don't worry about needing to join that breakout room. You're free to talk within your big space.
Folks from our breakout rooms will be coming back in the next 30 seconds.
Sorry.
I'm going to share that screen, yeah. About 10 seconds to wrap up. Any last thoughts? Okay, as folks are joining us back into the big room, I'm going to go ahead and share a link in the chat and also a QR code once I find my mouse. There we go. So this QR code and the link that I just popped in the chat is going to bring you to a Mentimeter. And I'm going to switch over to that screen in just a minute. But the prompt here is to enter a word or a small phrase to describe what your playful experience felt like. So what you created with those materials and what you shared with your partner in your small groups, go ahead and come up with a word or a phrase to enter. And we will share the Mentimeter and see what kinds of things we have. Ooh, it's relaxing. That's good on a Friday morning. I'm glad it was relaxing. Talked about dress up, talked about pretend. Ooh, creative. I'm glad that one came in. We'll talk about that in a little bit. The more words that are used continuously, like by multiple people, the bigger that those words will reflect on the screen. So if we see a word physically getting bigger, then that means that more than one person had the same phrase or word. Creative. Good. Okay, another few seconds to get in your words or phrases. I'm just looking over at Leanne's screen too because it's closer. It was fun. It was joyful. Perfect. Good. You guys are pros. That's the end of our session. Just kidding.
I love freedom. That's a great way to describe it. Expansive, whimsical, imaginative.
Nice. Okay, so we're going to hang on to this. If you have something that you're finishing to type in, go ahead and enter it. But I'm going to switch back to the PowerPoint. We do hope that you sort of keep these words and this visual in mind as we continue through our content today, and especially when you go back to your classroom or school settings. Be thinking about this idea of play and playful learning, what it's meant for you as an individual and how it made you feel, recalling those examples of playful learning, and thinking about that with your own students in your classrooms.
That's great.
Okay.
And we'll actually revisit that a little bit when we talk about one of the aspects of research a little bit later this morning, because the activity that you just engaged in is actually part of some research that was conducted globally a few years ago. And so we'll show you how that connects. All right. So remember that this first part this morning is the why of playful learning. And there are definitely some amazing whys. We know that when children, whether they're young children, older children, even adults, are engaged in play, that they are more relaxed about their learning. They will experience challenge that will stretch their thinking. Play offers an opportunity to seek new information that they may not have known before. Kids test their ideas through play. They'll make a hypothesis and they'll test it out. And sometimes it will work and sometimes it won't. And in that, learning is happening. We also know that play is an opportunity to build children's development in many different domains. And actually, in the next slide, we're going to look at those. But one more point about playful learning. Play helps children be active in their learning. And we know from brain research that active learning tends to stick better for our learners than passive learning does. So we can go to the next slide, Nicole. When we are thinking about the kinds of learning opportunities that play affords, they range a very broad spectrum. Everything from problem solving, whether it is kinds of cognitive problem solving that we want our kids to engage in, to social problem solving. Play encourages conversation. When I looked around, we didn't have to ask you to have conversations when you were building your representations. It was very natural. You jump in and start talking with each other. Play builds cooperation amongst learners. It helps you to learn to regulate your emotions and your behavior. You do a lot of negotiating when you're playing. You have to think about the perspectives that others are bringing to the situation. We know that play gives children a lot of agency over their learning. They get to make the decisions. They're in the driver's seat. As I talked about earlier, kids experiment through play. They'll take risks that they might not otherwise take. And often because they can take a risk, know it's okay to make a mistake and try again. And they're building knowledge through all of these experiences. So the quote at the bottom of this slide from Susan McKay is one that we want you to hold on to. Sometimes it's easy for us to think that play is just a set of activities we offer. We want you to think about play as a strategy for learning, not just a set of activities. Play as a pedagogy might be another way to think about that. How can we make play one of the strategies we use all the time to help children learn? So to get us thinking even a little bit more deeply about what playful learning might look like, we're going to watch a video in an early elementary classroom, actually across several classrooms. And as we are watching it, we would like you to be taking some notes for yourself and watching it to notice some things. One, we'd like you to notice what you can connect or relate to, what really resonates with you. And also, what are some things that you're seeing or hearing in the video that might intrigue you, inspire you, or even worry you a little bit? Hopefully you brought some note paper. As you're watching, jot those ideas down. If it's helpful to make yourself a quick little T-chart, you could put your connections on one side and the things that intrigue or inspire or worry you on the other side of the T-chart. Whatever works for you is fine. But take a few notes, because at the end of the video, we're going to return into breakout groups and give you a chance to have some conversation about what you noticed.
This year at Bemis, staff are placing an emphasis on an aspect of learning that may not spring to mind when thinking of school: the importance of play.
I think play looks different at all ages, and I think everyone should do it. Play is so important. Play can be just having conversations with a friend, moving your body, going on a walk. It's important to show kids what play looks like.
It's engaging children. It's making them curious and interested and wanting to try new things. It allows kids to access the curriculum from wherever they are.
We've seen how our kids can play together, how cooperative learning is important, how critical thinking skills skills come together. And often we hear, oh, play, that's something that's done outside of school, but it is a critical part of their learning.
Play is incorporated into everyday learning for all levels. Lower elementary students learn cooperation and problem solving and work on fine motor skills with play incorporated into the curriculum, while upper elementary students utilize group meetings or special projects like classroom economies to build community and critical thinking.
For the first time, they're navigating, taking turns with each other and how to resolve conflict, being problem solvers, all of those social skills that kind of build the foundation for a successful life.
At lower elementary levels, those skills are really lacking right now, and we need to see a lot more usage of scissors and glue sticks and how they are cutting out and maneuvering materials and building those muscles within their hands. So that has really been a focus of ours this year, is to be able to take the curriculum but also keep building in that sense of play and building their creativity as well as their fine motor skills muscles to create a whole child.
It really sets a positive tone at the start of the day where kids are excited and they're motivated. It builds our class community where kids are building stronger connections.
Incorporating play into the classroom is honestly one of the most important and sometimes undervalued assets as a teacher. We feel more comfortable with one another, we support each other, and it really sort of lends itself to having further conversations as a class.
At all levels, a focus on play has brought the Bemis classes and community closer together and produced noticeable impacts for students.
Playtime is the time of day when you experience the least amount of conflicts with the children. There's not as much behavior situations because this is the work that they do.
We really care and we really know about what's going on in each other's lives, just because of that unstructured time where we're not, okay, you're gonna say this at this time, or okay, now you're forced to be talked about this subject, and you don't really have that wiggle room. It gives them choice.
We've talked a lot about opening up our circle, building a class family, and what that really looks like. And I don't think we can do that without fun.
The work this year has shown that smiles, fun, and play will always have a place at Bemis.
Back. Okay, so thank you for your patience. It would be helpful to us to just get a sense of who was not able, how many of you were not able to hear the video or to actually see the video, so that we can troubleshoot a little bit on our end. If you want to pop that in the chat box for us, that would be great. I did put the link to the video in the chat box. And what we'll do, if it's helpful to you, is give just a few minutes for you to watch that on your own so that you can see it. If you just use that link, it should take you right to the video, because we want to make sure that you've had that experience. It's only 3 minutes in length, so it's not real long. And maybe what we can do is replay it again for everybody else. I don't think it'll hurt to watch it one more time. Does that seem like it would make sense? Okay, so it's 9:39. If you need to rewatch it on your end, and we'll replay it on our end, and that'll give you a chance to see it one more time. So let's plan that at 9:44, we'll shift to breakout rooms. So that'll give you a few minutes to watch it if you weren't able to hear it or access it.
This year at Bemis, staff are placing an emphasis on an aspect of learning that may not spring to mind when thinking of school: the importance of play.
I think play looks different at all ages, and I think everyone should do it. Play is so important. Play can be just having conversations with a friend, moving your body, going on a walk. It's important to show kids what play looks like.
It's engaging children. It's making them curious and interested and wanting to try new things. It allows kids to access the curriculum from wherever they are.
We've seen how our kids can play together, how cooperative learning is important, how critical thinking skills skills come together. And often we hear, oh, play, that's something that's done outside of school, but it is a critical part of their learning.
Play is incorporated into everyday learning for all levels. Lower elementary students learn cooperation and problem solving and work on fine motor skills with play incorporated into the curriculum, while upper elementary students utilize group meetings or special projects like classroom economies to build community and critical thinking.
For the first time, they're navigating, taking turns with each other and how to resolve conflict, being problem solvers, all of those social skills that kind of build the foundation for a successful life.
At lower elementary levels, those skills are really lacking right now, and we need to see a lot more usage of scissors and glue sticks and how they are cutting out and maneuvering materials and building those muscles within their hands. So that has really been a focus of ours this year, is to be able to take the curriculum but also keep building in that sense of play and building their creativity as well as their fine motor skills muscles to create a whole child.
It really sets a positive tone at the start of the day where kids are excited and they're motivated. It builds our class community where kids are building stronger connections.
Incorporating play into the classroom is honestly one of the most important and sometimes undervalued assets as a teacher. We feel more comfortable with one another, we support each other, and it really sort of lends itself to having further conversations as a class.
At all levels, a focus on play has brought the Bemis classes and community closer together and produced noticeable impacts for students.
Playtime is the time of day when you experience the least amount of conflicts with the children. There's not as much behavior situations because this is the work that they do.
We really care and we really know about what's going on in each other's lives, just because of that unstructured time where we're not, okay, you're going to say this at this time, or okay, now you're forced to be talked about this subject, and you don't really have that wiggle room. It gives them choice.
We've talked a lot about opening up our circle, building a class family, and what that really looks like. And I don't think we can do that without fun.
The work this year has shown that smiles, fun, and play will always have a place at Bemis.
Okay, audio on. All right. Well, thank you so much for your patience, folks. Hopefully that go through improved for some folks, or at least being able to watch it yourself with the video link made that piece a little bit easier for you. So Renee is going to open up the breakout rooms again, and join if you are not sitting in a large group already. But what we'd like you to do is to take about 5 minutes to share some of your noticings. What were some of the connections that you made? What were some things that intrigued you or inspired you or even worried you as you were watching that video? When we come back together, we'll invite people to put some of their thoughts either in the chat box or even come off and share a couple of their ideas before we shift in to the next part of our presentation. All set? Yep, Renee will open up those rooms.
Okay, let's give about a little more than 10 seconds to wrap up your conversations, and we'll come back as a whole group. Yeah, breakout rooms have closed, so we'll let anybody that needs to come back, come back.
All right. And thanks for being patient with us. We're working through breakout rooms and we'll get there. Some of you we rearranged to make sure that we could get in. It's really helpful if you are by yourselves and you're assigned in a breakout room to jump in, because sometimes otherwise there might be somebody just there who has no one else to talk to. So thanks in advance for your flexibility and jumping in. So now that you had a chance to connect a little bit about this, we'd love to hear what some of those connections were from the video. You can either come off mute and share, or, and it would be helpful if you would raise your hand on screen just so that we can call on you, or go ahead and type into the chat a connection that you made. What was something that stood out to you, or that the video helped you to think about? Thanks, Victoria. Yeah. How much peer modeling happens through play, right? The ability for children to see what another child is doing and to learn how to try that on for themselves, right? And the amount of sensory learning that happens, right? We know a lot of our kids, they do and learn so much from touch, from the sounds that they're hearing, the sensory experiences that they're having. That's great. I think I saw someone else say they're learning, and they definitely are learning, and play is used as a strategy. And yeah, the developmentally appropriate aspect of play. One of the things that's so great about play is that all kids can enter into play in some way. They can all feel successful with play. And yeah, that community of learners, that's a cultural that develops, right? That everyone feels success as a learner. And Union 93, that's a great point, right? There are so many distractions in our world, but when you watch young children playing, they can stay so focused for a very long time when they are in the flow of play, right? They're using their imagination, they're super engaged in what they're doing. It helps them learn to be able to sustain focus for a lengthier period of time. Right. Thank you for all of those wonderful noticings in that video. And as Nicole moves us now into what some of the benefits of play are that we know across domains of development, be thinking about some of these connections that you just made and where you see them showing up in that research.
Great. Thanks, Leanne. So before I kick us off in this conversation, I just wanted to sort of bring to light something that we've noticed in recent months in having these conversations about more play-based learning strategies in our public schools. We've come to see, and I hope that you would agree, that it's not a hard sell, right? When we talk to educators or when we talk to families or to administrators and we say children need play, right? For all of the reasons that you all just listed in the chat box, that's not a hard argument to have, right? For the most part, folks nod and say, yes, we agree. Yes, tell us more. But what we're hoping in these next few slides and the rest of our time together is to start to give folks more of that understanding of why, because it's easy to say it's important. It's easy to agree that it's important, but to understand the actual benefits that it gives a young child. to give folks the vernacular that comes with that, to give folks access to some research so that you can have that in your toolbox as well in the event that you want to continue to have these conversations and advocate for these practices in your settings. So I'm going to move us on into some more of the benefits of play, and specifically the cognitive benefits. So we know that play-based learning offers significant benefits cognitively to a child's development, especially in young children, as it supports how they naturally learn and develop, right? So here's a quick visual. And I understand and apologize if it appears small on your end. It looks a little funky. It might not be a new visual for folks. You may have seen something like this in your educational path along early childhood. But go ahead and just use the chat or unmute and chime in. What's something that you might notice or that you're picking up in looking at this image? I'm not giving away too much information yet. I will in a second, but for now, it's just a visual. And you notice. There's more black lines in year 2. Perfect. Hold on to that. They get more complicated.
It's a good way to say that, Kaya.
Mm-hmm. It is. So I'll spill the beans a little bit. This first image illustrates the development of synaptic connections, right? What we often refer to as synapses in the brain. It's a human brain, of course, and it represents those synapses from late gestation, about around 36 weeks gestation, through early childhood or age 6. So some of you notice the obvious, right? There's a lot of black lines and even some black dots, and they become complicated. I like that word. Another word we might say, at least in my notes, is that they become more dense over time. So if you look at the images that are above the blue synapse formation image, right? That 36 weeks to 2 years. Just 2 years, just 24 months, right? We can all remember the last 24 months. It's not a long period of time. But during that period, that's when those synapses form rapidly. Those neural structures become increasingly dense. And what they're doing is they're becoming interconnected. It's a reflection of the brain's rapid growth during this time period. It's a visual of new neural pathways forming in a child's brain. As the child ages, so moving into sort of the 2 images that are above that red synapse pruning, that 2 years to 6 years time frame. After that burst of connectivity from 36 weeks to 2 years, the brain undergoes what we call synapse pruning. So I imagine that in our audience today, there are folks who like to garden, right? And you plant your seeds or you plant your sprouts and you tend to them. You give them nutrients in the soil, you give them access to sunlight, you give them access to water, you keep the pests out, right? So that they can grow and flourish and produce for you what you're hoping they'll produce. In the process of doing that, you also get other things growing, weeds, right? And what does any good gardener do? They go out and they trim the weeds. They don't need those weeds there to enhance the growth of the plant that they're trying to grow. So that's a kind of similar analogy to what's happening in a young child's brain between 2 to 6 years old. It goes through this synapse pruning. It's where all of those excess synapses that have been created start to get eliminated because they're not tended to. They're not needed any longer. It refines that neural circuit, right? It makes it more efficient and specialized based on that child's experience and learning. So you can imagine a young child who has access to rich vocabulary, rich interactions with peers and adults, experiences inside and outside the home, right? That's all tending to the growth of that child's brain, and it over-creates these connections. So many connections that they don't need them all. So we start to prune them out. This next image is similar, but different. I think the biggest difference here that I want to draw your attention to is that last column. It's the adult. So we have images to reflect those synapses from a newborn up to age 2 in these yellow orangey boxes. And then that last one shows the adult synapses, those neuron connections. What do you notice? Chat, unmute, feel free to pop in. The more dense, oh, thank you, Victoria, you're in the room with us. The more dense or thick black lines in the adult. Okay, so that's a great observation. Those synapses, the lines in the adult are a little thicker than they are in a child. Okay, I'll leave that there for a moment, see if there's any other noticings. So over the course of this individual's time, from being a toddler to being an adult, those synapses, those based on the experiences that the adult has had, are maintained. And some of them, like Victoria noted, continue to grow, continue to thicken. However, that synaptic pruning has occurred. That 2-year-old dense synapse visual and the adult synapse visual are not much different. I mean, if we're comparing it to a newborn, it's vastly different, as it should be. But the time period between a toddler and adult, when we talk about neural connections, is not hugely different. It tells us that that young period of time between a child's development and the first 2-4-ish years of their life is critical. The experiences, the interactions, the vocabulary, all of the things that we say is critical during that period of time. It really sets the tone for their continued growth and cognitive abilities. Some other key words here that I think are not new terms, but are ones that are hugely important when we're talking about cognitive benefits of play. Executive function, right? This is one that I think educators hear and use a lot, right? This is the benefit, or through play, children benefit and develop their executive functioning skills. This is their working memory, their cognitive flexibility, their self-control. I mentioned the importance of interactions, right? That language and communication skill development. Children practice vocabulary through play and sentence structure through interactions. They engage in storytelling and conversation, right? Much like some of you did in some of our activities already. They learn the social rules of communication, taking turns, listening, learning patience. They learn critical problem solving and critical thinking skills, right? They're able, through play, they're able to try out new ideas, test hypotheses, make decisions, analyze outcomes, engage in trial and error. This is all that heavy stuff behind the scenes of why play is important. These are the things that we want folks to roll off your tongue, right? When you're talking about why play is important to your families and to your other colleagues and administrators. Hugely important is a child's pre-literacy skills. I know we have a large audience today who work in special education departments, likely have students with speech and language delays, right? These pre-literacy skills, which I've lacked apparently, and the ability around the language and communication skills that I mentioned earlier, right? Using signs, learning how to use symbols to interact, and to write and to read, to make meaning through role play. Mathematical thinking, right? These are big terms when we're talking about 4-year-olds, 5-year-olds, 6-year-olds. It's the sorting, the counting, the measuring, the patterning. Breaking into those creativity and imagination skills, right? Hugely important and developed through play. Encouraging divergent thinking, how to find solutions to problems, how to think outside the box. Knowledge construction, connecting new experiences with what they already know, right? And so depending on what type of background a child has when they're coming to you, some of that what they already know piece may happen through your classroom instruction, right? But getting to know their background, getting to know what they've already experienced up to this point is going to be hugely important for you to know. So playful learning is not just play. It's not just setting a child loose in a space and observing what they do. It's powerful brain building activity that supports their cognitive development across multiple domains, which I've just mentioned here. It is factually, developmentally appropriate, right? It's engaging and it's essential for lifelong learning. Okay, so moving on a little bit outside of cognitive benefits and into emotional intelligence. I'm not going to spend a ton of time on these slides. I'm not going to read every single word, but we do just want to highlight continued benefits of play in a child's development. So through this, they're learning and building on their emotional intelligence, right? This is sort of the science behind it. It's developed typically by age 5 and supports their emotional well-being, their school success, and healthy relationships later on in life. Right, so you can see here, it's a photo of middle school, high school age children playing, right? So it's developed in early childhood, but through continued support, through continued encouragement, it grows, and it should never stop. We just had a room full of adults across the state playing, and you were smiling, you were joyful, you were creative, you were relaxed, right? All the things. Children experience it similarly. The last bullet I will read is just, it says that through play, children gain the chance to practice choosing when to take charge and when to follow others' lead, right? A lot of times in classrooms that are not particularly play-based, that choice and that autonomy piece isn't as accessible. But when we look at it through a play lens, we can really see the benefits of a child's emotional intelligence. The next benefit, which we've touched upon briefly, though, is the benefits of play on language development, right? Language and play are very much intertwined. It builds those representational skills, right? A card box can be anything. It can be a house, it can be a rocket ship, and through that creativity and through that imagination, children's language develops to describe what they're making, to interact and pretend with what they're creating, to share their thoughts and to share their learning. Those skills that support the language skills are the use of words to represent thoughts and items. It's a safe space that children can practice their language up to this point and practice new words and new language skills that they're learning. Building off of that and continuing with some more language development benefits, it promotes and is associated with, like I said, greater vocabulary development and increased oral narrative skills. We talk a lot about the importance of storytelling. We've done a lot of work supporting educators across the state think about how they could incorporate more storytelling strategies in their classrooms as a sort of a baseline into how to scratch the surface of more playful learning, right? Digging into a child's world a little bit. What are you thinking? Tell me a story about that. It might be factual. It might be fictional, it doesn't matter. It's sort of giving you a lens into their understanding of any given topic. And then through guided play, which we'll dig into a little bit later on today, an adult is able to ask questions, is able to model, a lot of language, a lot of sort of how-tos of how to interact with people. They're able to facilitate opportunities and peer interactions, right? It's really there to, I think earlier somebody mentioned in the chat box, having to teach children how to play, given the tech and social world that we live in right now. And that's 100% true. Best way to do that is to guide the children through it, right? Not do this, not that, but rather modeling the language, modeling the sharing, modeling the use of materials. It's also associated with a much higher receptive and expressive language data. Two more just quick slides on executive function, right? We were talking about this earlier on the neuron slides and sort of a child's working memory and self-control. We know that play enhances those core executive functions. We know that through play, a child can include their working memory and cognitive flexibility and inhibitory control. We're going to dig into some research, but overwhelmingly, there is research that exists to show that pretend play, especially, and rule-based games can improve skills by requiring children to plan, to shift attention, to follow rules, those sorts of things. Some more information on pretend play here too, which I know was also one of the words that came up in our Mentimeter earlier, right? A lot of your own play experiences reflected opportunities to pretend. We'll talk a little bit too around rule-based games and what that looks like in terms of a definition for play. And then the last piece here that I just wanted to share is that working memory is practiced through play, keeping track of evolving play rules, remembering character roles, helps children develop that working memory. It's sustained through pretend play. Children hold multiple ideas and actions in their mind at once, right? We saw that visual of those neurons. A lot is happening. A lot of connections are being made. Child-led play also builds planning and goal setting. So when kids direct their own play and have that agency and autonomy and choice, they're able to set the goals, right? Like, here's the material, let's go build a fort. And organize, they are able to organize steps to achieve them, which reinforces their planning and task management. So again, this is all like the big, heavy stuff that sort of lives behind this term play, which is so light and fluffy and important. There's a lot of meat that goes along with this that we want folks to not only be aware of, but have the confidence to sort of talk about and recall. Okay, quiz time. You don't have to answer this in any way besides just to yourself or to a neighbor, but what do you think about this idea of defining play? Do you think it can be defined in more than one way? Or do you think when we talk about play, there's just one definition and it's sort of more black and white? So just take like 15 seconds just to sort of mull that over. Okay. So you don't have to answer the question to me or to the group or anything like that, right? But when me and my colleagues here from the department, when we talk with folks around play, we specify that you really need to define what you're talking about, right? Because in our space, and especially in my opinion, play can be defined in more than one way. And when you're interacting with a family and you say, oh, as an educator in my classroom, I practice a play-based learning strategy. Okay. And what you mean by that and what the family hears when you say that might not be the same thing, right? The family may or may not be thinking recess, right? My child's teacher, it's just a free-for-all. There's a bunch of fun materials and my kid just plays with it. So as a family, possibly defining play that way, unintentionally based on what you're trying to describe, that may have a guttural reaction of, but when do they learn, right? When do they learn their numbers? When do they learn how to read and write? But as an educator, and you're saying I implore play-based strategies, you may be talking about something else. So whenever we are talking about play with educators, we want to define it. So for me, there's 3 ways that we could do that. One of them is free play. So when we think about, well, I'm not going to get into that yet. One of them is free play. Another one is guided play. And the third one is teacher-directed play. So any one of these things, these definitions could be happening, not at the same time necessarily, but when we're talking about when our children are playing, we want to define what that means. So when we have opportunities for children to access free play, this is that uninhibited, unfettered playtime. It happens alone. It might happen with peers. It's when our children are exploring, discovering, and imagining at will. Oftentimes when we talk about free play, we think about recess, outdoor recess, right? That's not a curricular time of the day. That's unfettered, uninhibited. Go be a kid. There's a time and a place for free play. Guided play is when we talk about free play, but with gentle, maybe unobtrusive guidance from an adult or another child even, right? Those people steer the play, but not the outcome. So when we think about guided play in a classroom setting, you might think of this as maybe centers. Some of our first and second grade classrooms across the state use a program where they refer to this time as studios, right? Regardless of what you call it, that guided playtime is when children have access to materials that they can freely interact with, right? You're giving that child the access to the material, but you're not necessarily telling them what to do with it, right? So if you're studying a topic on structures, construction, building, that sort of thing, and you might give the children blocks to play with. And they might build a building because that's what the conversations have been recently, or some type of structure. But they might not either, and that's okay. Teacher-directed play, our third and final definition of the word, is a prescribed activity with a set outcome. So when we think of teacher-directed play, you might think of a game, right? A board game. A bingo game, a matching game, something where there is a set outcome, there are rules, there are turns to take, that sort of nature. Again, a time and place for all of these to exist in our classrooms. One other sort of quick visual around a play continuum is here. This is a continuum of pedagogical strategies for play-based learning, big words. It's taken from what we call an appetite to play, which is used in the Play Today handbook. We could probably provide these resources at another time, but this is just another visual to show sort of the continuum of the definition of play being child-directed, uninhibited, across the spectrum to educator directed, and how it can sort of fall within this spectrum of definitions, from free play to inquiry, collaborative play to playful learning and learning games, all of which offer the benefits I've already mentioned to your cognitive development, your language skills, your math skills, your interactive skills, right? Those are all learned and honed in during these times. Okay, I'm going to switch it over to Leanne.
All right. So we've talked a lot about the why, and I think we've hopefully done a good job of pointing out all of the various benefits of play. And if we recognize that there's so many benefits of play, it's interesting that there still seems to be a bit of a paradox or a contradiction between the idea of play and school. So I want you to think for just a moment, why do you think there's some level of tension between this notion of play, which is so beneficial for learning, and a school setting? Why do you think it might be a harder sell in school? Think about that for just a second, maybe jot down one or two ideas. We're going to share a few of these paradoxes, and you can see if they hit your list, and then we'll open it up to see if you had others. So the first is, often when we think about play, we recognize that children are in charge of their play, right? But at school, typically the agenda seems to be set mostly by adults. And so there's a little bit of a contradiction there. So to advance more play might mean adults stepping back a little bit and giving children a little bit more agency over their learning. Doesn't mean that adults don't have some of that agency still and that they shouldn't. Of course they should, right? It was what Nicole was talking about a few minutes ago in that continuum of play that we want to try to strive to provide. Another is that play often involves some level of risk for children, whether that is physical risk or cognitive risk that they're taking. We often, I think, over time have set up a perspective that in school children should be safe. And yes, we want them to be physically safe, but we also want them to experience some disequilibrium, some risk taking in a safe environment that supports that so that they can make mistakes and they can know and learn from those mistakes. So offering opportunity for more risk taking is something that might be a bit of a contradiction when for so long we've been really striving with this idea of safe environment. Another is the whole issue of time, right? As educators, I think we would all say we never feel like we have enough time. And the thing about play is that play can take some time. In fact, for kids to really get invested in play, they need enough time. They shouldn't even realize how much time is going by if they're that deeply engaged. But in school, we work on a lot of schedules, right? And so the ability to offer the time for play might seem like one of those challenges. So we need to think about how we can embed that into those scheduled blocks of time during our day. Additionally, play is one of those things that really can be messy and loud. And often I think when we think about school, or even as our families think about school, they expect a sense of order. And so if it appears like it's too noisy, it's too chaotic in a classroom, it's hard to think that learning could be happening. And so how we change that perspective is really important. How about other things that might have surfaced on your lists? Go ahead and pop any of those ideas in the chat box right now. Thanks, Kyla. Yeah. How much support have our teachers had in how to make learning more playful or to offer those opportunities? Yeah, and how do we show that connection from play to its impact on learning in the different ways we measure it, right? We're going to talk about that more in our third session this year, but our ability to be able to document the impact that playful learning has on students' overall academic achievement. Yeah, play is student-led. That's a great point, but often teachers are seen as the leaders of learning in schools. Yeah, Victoria, you're right. That when we say play in a school setting, it often makes adults step back and think, well, where's the learning happening? So one thing that we're really hopeful that you can lean on a little bit is that all of that research that we're sharing today that documents how play does contribute to children's development across domains, including their academic learning. One piece that I'll point out from what Nicole had shared with you earlier that I think might be a really good one to think about for our state assessment is that when children have the ability to engage in play, they are often using their imaginations. And the use of imagination is directly connected to ability to comprehend what children need. In order to be a good comprehender, you've got to be able to use that imagination. You have to be able to create images in your mind, pictures in your mind, think deeply, which is what imagination or imaginative play encourages kids to develop as a skill. Often children who've had lots of experience with imaginative play are much stronger comprehenders. And comprehension is really what a lot of our academic measures are measuring, children's ability to comprehend. So that right there might be a good selling point for why playful learning is so important for our young children. You've come up with some great thinking, right? So I think it will take all of us as practitioners to really help shift our cultural perspective about the importance of play as we start to try to infuse more playful learning. And then we've got to be good documenters of what that positive impact is on children's learning. All right, we have been sitting for quite some time, and we want to give you all about a 10-minute break. So it is 10:27, and we would love for you to get up, stretch, visit with your colleagues, and come back together at 10:37. And we will dive into the second half of our time together.
I apologize. I had to run to the bathroom quickly. How long are we on break until? Should have waited.
Okay, it's 10:38 now. Go ahead and ask folks to rejoin. I'm gonna move along into the second half of our time together today, to our second part, which is going to focus a little more deeply on some research insights. So there's recent research for sure. Oops, just a second. My computer wanted to update, not amazing timing. There's surely some recent research, as I was saying, that does underscore the significance of play, right? It sort of highlights some of the things that Leanne and I have been sharing with you so far this morning. And really, there's research that goes way back. So we wanted to share a little bit specifically from a couple, and then also just give you some additional resources to have that you would be able to, access that on your own time should you have the interest in doing so. So I'm going to kick us off into our second part, talk a little bit more around the study of play. So this first researcher that we're going to share, his face here, his name is Dr. Stuart Brown. And the thing that I really find interesting about Dr. Brown is that he didn't study early childhood or childhood development, for that matter, as a young man entering the workforce. He was actually a psychiatrist by trade, and not necessarily a child psychiatrist, just more generally speaking. He does have a TED Talk, which I don't plan on showing, but wanted to share the link here quickly, that if you have 20 minutes, I would highly recommend you listen to. It's back from 2008. The title of his TED Talk was "How Does Play Shape Our Development?" So like I said, if you've got 20 minutes or so on your ride home and you want to Bluetooth his TED Talk, I would highly encourage it. There's nothing you need to see necessarily, but just listening to his words and his background is really compelling. So one thing that he mentions in the beginning of his TED Talk is back, 20 years or so ago, Time magazine had their cover feature of that particular month around the importance of play. And on the cover of that magazine, it highlighted various photos of children playing or depicting playful, smiles, joy, jumping, all the things. And one thing he noticed was that those pictures of the children playing on the cover of that magazine, the children were just alone. It was just one child depicted in the photo. There was no depiction of play with peers or play with an adult or anything like that. And so then he brings up this photo. This is just a snippet of the full photo, but ultimately this is a painting depicting a courtyard in Europe in the 15th century. And it was created decades upon decades ago. And this photo depicts, if you were to count, Dr. Brown counted, and so I just take his word for it, but it depicts 124 different kinds of play across all ages of individuals painted in the picture. It shows examples of rough play, solo play, games, taunting, right? And he suspects that this was a typical picture of a courtyard back then. And he goes on to say that we may have lost something in our culture when it comes to play, because it's not solitary and it's not just for young children, but it spans the ages. So I mentioned earlier that Dr. Brown was not educated in the area of early childhood development. And I'm trying to think of how to lightly broach this topic. He began studying play back in the 60s. And that was when his research determined that children need play in order to learn. So as early as 1966, Dr. Stuart Brown came to this realization through his work. He realized then that children learn about the world through play. And the reason that he came to this result, this outcome, was because he started to research the lives of murderers. which I don't know if you find that fascinating, but I certainly do. I think it's really interesting that this educated man was asked to join a task force to specifically study a particular mass murder case that happened in Texas at the time. It happened on August 1st in 1966. And basically, this particular story, I actually think I have a snippet here. Yep. This particular story was about a young gentleman. He was 25 years old. His name was Charles Whitman. And this one particular awful day, Charles Whitman made the stark decision to kill his wife and his mother. And then he drove to the University of Texas in Austin and continued his spree, which resulted in 17 more people dead and 41 people wounded. So at that time, they put a task force together to better understand why, because as you can imagine back then, this was at the time the largest mass murder that had happened to that point. So researchers and law enforcement were really intrigued in better understanding why Whitman did this and how it can be avoided potentially in other cases. So what they found through researching Charles Whitman's upbringing up to his 25 years thus far was that he had never shown a tendency for violence. He had no criminal record. He was an altar boy in his church. He was the youngest boy to become an Eagle Scout. So what went wrong, right? That was the question that folks were trying to solve. So like I said, they assembled a team and they contacted Dr. Brown because he was a behavioral psychiatrist at the time, and they wanted him to sort of unfold some of this. So ultimately, what they found was that Whitman, the killer, was raised in an authoritarian, abusive household where his overbearing father controlled his behavior and systematically suppressed his natural playfulness. Ultimately, he was deprived the opportunity to play. So the committee concluded that lack of play, now remember this was in 1966, lack of play was a key factor leading to this horrific act. And researchers believed that he would have developed the skill necessary, he would have developed flexibility, he would have developed strength to cope with stressful situations had he been given the opportunity for more regular moments of spontaneous play during his childhood. So this really intrigued Dr. Brown. He then conducted a year-long review of young men at the time imprisoned for murder, which again showed significant difference in play histories among those that were convicted. They compared it to a statewide control group that the men imprisoned for murder were in fact severely, this is their words, severely play deficient. So, of course, children routinely deprived of play, they think will not necessarily turn to violence, right? That's like, boom, worst case scenario. But what they did discover is that children who are overly controlled and deprived of free play can develop unhealthy behaviors and poor coping mechanisms. By letting them play, by nurturing their natural playfulness, research showed that, and encouraging them to carry out that into adulthood, it would help them learn to adapt better to social situations, become more resilient under stress without lashing out, etc. So at the greatest extreme, play saves lives, right? Who can argue with that? Dr. Brown continued his research in play. He is now the founder of the National Institute of Play. You can find this research and others at the website that's there. It's nifplay.org. And also you would find there his unusual story about, in Manitoba, and its impact of play on brains and relationships, specifically in animals, which is really fascinating if you have the time to sort of dig into that. And at the very end of it all, he charges us to think about a life without play, right? So regardless of the research and awful story that I just shared that he studied, think about what a life without play would look like for yourself, for your loved ones, and for your students. So in Manitoba, this is just two quick visuals here on the study of play in animals. So in Manitoba, there was a photographer, his name was Norbert. He was a German photographer, and he was out here with these huskies who are tethered, and he was photographing the huskies and nature around him when along came this wild male polar bear. And he had arguably, as you can see in the photo, a predatory gaze. The female huskies, who, again, I'll remind you, are tethered, right? They can't run away. They're sort of pinned in the space that they're in. Immediately, instead of becoming guarded and defensive or scared, the female husky immediately went into a play position. And as the photographer sat and sort of watched in who knows what kind of emotional state he was in at the moment, what he saw was this sort of play ballet unfold, right? The polar bear, with his predatory gaze, immediately relaxed and rolled over. And on Dr. Brown's website that I just shared, you can find more photos of this. And he sort of describes how the animals entered this altered state of play. So it's really fascinating how play plays out, so to speak, no pun intended, in nature, and how the benefits of that in nature as well as in our classroom. So that's just to share a sort of a fun twist on where Dr. Brown's research led him as a psychiatrist and the benefits of play. The next researcher I'm going to highlight is Dr. George Land. And he is, again, this research happened back in the 60s, so it's pretty old, but it's still fascinating and still has really great connections to our current work. He performed a study on children, creativity, and schooling, but again, he was not educated in the world of child development. He was more focused on and hired to create NASA's creativity study. Again, there's a TED Talk. His is not quite as long, I don't think, as Dr. Brown's, but if you ever have a chance to listen to it. So he was hired by NASA because in the 60s, NASA had a heightened focus on hiring innovative minds. They commissioned Dr. Land to design a creativity test, right? They wanted to find and hire individuals for NASA who could think outside of the box. And they weren't sure how to do that, how to identify a creative or innovative person. So along comes Dr. Land. So he conducted a study. It focused on young children, ages 3 to 5. In all, there were 1,600 children enrolled in a Head Start program at the time that this creativity test was administered to. It was initially developed, like I said, to recruit NASA staff. So very educated adults were meant to take this test, but he administered it to children 3 to 5 years old. And then as a result of that, scientists were, or not as a result, excuse me, leading up to that, the answers that they wanted solved were, where does creativity come from? Right? Can they pinpoint a time or place or reason why a person might be creative or not? They wanted to know if some people were born with it, right? Are you just born in this way, or is it learned through some type of education or experience? So those 1,600 children were tested. And by definition, creativity, what they were using is that it's the capacity to look at a problem and come up with a new, different, and innovative idea for it, right? So within this context, we're all born theoretically as creative geniuses, according to his research, right? We all have that innately, but only 2% of adults over time maintain that status. So his research showed that that 98% of those children who are ages 4 to 5 learn what causes them to learn over time non-creative behavior. Sorry, I sort of reversed that a little bit. So according to his study, it's sort of the shackles, so to speak, of excessive rules, of conformity, of the fear of failure. As we age, these things become more and more prominent, thereby diminishing or hindering our creative outputs. So in a world that sort of never stops changing, where every new problem requires novel solutions, this can be tragic, right? We're not hiring 4-year-olds at NASA. Maybe we should, I don't know, right? We want to hire folks in positions as adults who still have that innovative thinking. So if you can't really see the graph that well, I can just explain it really quick. Over on the left, that the tall 98% bar, that's the percentage of 5-year-olds who were considered creative geniuses. Over time, at age 10, that percentage, that result drops to 30% of 10-year-olds. Again, over time, at age 15, only 12%. And I should have mentioned, if you haven't gathered that yet, those 1,600 children that they started the study with, these are the same children. So at age 4, 98% of them were considered creative geniuses. Those same children at age 10 had dropped to 30%. Those same children at age 15 dropped to 12%. And then those same children at age 31, it dropped down to 2%. Only 2% of them were considered creative geniuses, which within the framework of the study is the, like I said, the capacity to look at a problem and try and solve it. So Dr. George Land's creativity study highlights that a concerning decline in creative genius from children to childhood to adulthood. It's the traditional educational model emerged through that work as a potential culprit, resulting in a final question of how can schools foster divergent thinking in an effort to spark innate creativity. This particular study made me think too of a classroom observation a few years ago, well, 2 years ago, in a first grade classroom that I had the privilege to join and observe in central Maine. And during the time that I was there observing, children were offered an opportunity to partake in what I said was called centers or studios. And they were, at the moment, studying a unit on animals, how animals survive, the habitats that they live in, things like that. Specifically, or not specifically, but as you can imagine, that included animals here in Maine, right? Animals that we talk and hear about often, but it did expand outside of Maine as well. So while I was observing one little boy in his block center, he was using Legos, and he was creating this structure with those Legos. Now, we all, I think, know what Legos are, right? They're very rigid, they're straight, they have sharp corners, they're squares, they're rectangles. You don't often find them with soft sides or really clear things that they could be. So this child manipulated this great structure, and he was very intent and focused on it the entire time. And when he felt like he was finished, he brought it to show his teacher. And she had no idea, of course, what it was. She wasn't interacting with him during that time. She was out in another center. But, she said, "Oh my goodness, tell me what you made." And he described for her the ocean scene that he created with Legos, right? Now, when you think of an ocean, you think of very soft materials, waves, soft animals, round things, not Legos. But this little boy's creative genius used the Legos to depict an ocean complete with crabs, lobsters, seaweed. I believe there was a shark or a whale. It was a large fish depiction. And he went through and described every single thing that those Legos represented. And in his mind, it was a crystal clear view of an ocean habitat. He didn't have a coyote in the ocean, right? Like coyotes don't live in the ocean, so he didn't depict that. But he had a very clear understanding of what an ocean habitat was, what it looked like, and what type of animals lived in that area. And through his creativity and through his interest in Legos, he was able to depict that and express it vividly to his teacher. And so as an adult, if somebody were to ask me, show me your understanding of an ocean habitat, I can promise you I wouldn't go to Legos. I would probably go to writing or some other type of depiction or drawing to show my understanding of an ocean habitat. And had this educator done that, if her expectation was my students' assessment of their ocean habitat knowledge is done through writing or drawing, then this little boy may not have been successful in depicting that. However, given the freedom of materials and choice in his time, he was able to do that. So Dr. Land's creativity study always makes me think of that little boy in first grade. One more gentleman that I wanted to mention among the plethora of researchers out there is Dr. Peter Gray. And he, unlike Dr. Land and Dr. Brown, does study the development of children or development of humans and how they learn. So through his work, he's found that play is in fact social and emotional, right? It does support that sort of regulation in a child's development, their moral reasoning. He has found over time that imagination, like we've said many times today, is in fact a key link between play and creativity. It enables children to explore their hypothetical situations and new ways of being, right? A Lego can be a whale. Who'd have thunk it? Adults play a vital role by creating environments that protect and nurture that curiosity and nurture that play. Right, that little boy in his Legos had the opportunity and the encouragement to interact with those materials, and he had a safe space to do so. Especially adults' role in play through modern life restricts these natural learning processes, right? We never want to depict a child or deprive a child from the opportunity to play. So there's two aspects of education: knowledge, skills, and curiosity. That's how children acquire knowledge, right? Play is how they acquire skills. So continuing on this idea of the role of adults, right? All of our attendees today are assumably adults. So what is your role in childhood play and creativity? It's to sort of remember that creativity is natural. It's not taught, right? Dr. Land told us that young children are creative geniuses. It can be suppressed, though. By limiting play, limiting curiosity, limiting social interaction, we can start to diminish that skill in children. Again, it's exactly what Dr. Land's research on creativity showed us over time. Thinking about those paradoxes we were talking about before break, modern schooling can often stifle creativity, right? It can prioritize efficiency, productivity, standardized achievement over play. Research shows us that a decline in creative thinking among children since the 80s, especially in early grades. So we're getting a little bit closer to 2025 now. Children's lives are increasingly structured around achievement rather than open-ended exploration, right? Asking why or why not, right? Instead of having black and white answers to things. We also know that our current educational priorities may unintentionally overlook the needs of childhood. It may shift focus away from imagination and play towards pressure and performance. So just want to sort of be aware of that in our planning and in our daily schedules. Okay, I'm just going to go sort of quickly through some of these. Play is universal, right? It's culturally determined. This was from a study back in 2015. How children play, where and when they play, with whom they play, when and if they should stop playing. All of those ideas are cultural constructs. And this is not my slide to present, so I'm going to switch it over to Leanne because my notes now say that it's her turn.
Okay.
Thank you.
On a roll.
I was on a roll.
And actually, I think before we dive into this one, we wanted to just give you a little bit of time to process some of what Nicole was sharing with you. So we're going to invite you to take a second, kind of think about what from the information she shared with you about Dr. Land, Dr. Gray, etc., is sticking with you. What's maybe a takeaway, something that you recognize in that body of research that is important to keep in mind when we are talking about why play is so significant for young learners. And when you have a thought, go ahead and pop it right into the chat box. If you're in a group of folks, feel free to take a couple of minutes right now just to have a quick conversation. We're not going to go to breakout rooms just for the sake of time, but either chat in your big group or please offer one of your takeaways in the chat box. Okay. So we're going to come back together now. Oh, thank you, Carol. Yeah. Yeah, that is a really interesting aspect of the work and study of play, is to really see how it's not just humans, right? But all animals that crave. It's kind of an intrinsic quality that we are born with. And if we stifle that and don't enable the opportunities to happen, that may not be as beneficial to our overall development, for sure. Yeah. And we will, I know earlier I saw in the chat box, and I did respond that folks were interested in a lot of the links to the various videos or resources. So you'll be getting an email from us at the very end of the session today. And in it, we've tried to put the links that we had talked about, and then we'll go back to and put together maybe a list of some of the research resources that we've drawn upon that we can steer you to as well, so that you have access to them. All right. So we're going to share with you one more body of research that's more recent. And this comes out of Harvard's Project Zero work. Project Zero is a team at Harvard, our division at Harvard, that does a lot of really interesting research projects. Often they are focused on educational aspects. And not too many years ago now, in the late 2000, like around 18, 19, they have been engaged in a project called the Pedagogy of Play. And what kind of started this for Harvard was that they had begun to notice that learning achievement in some countries seemed to be far advancing that in other countries, and they were kind of curious about that. And one of the things that interested them was the cultural aspect of play, and how much play is afforded to children in these different countries. But what they ended up focusing on more readily was what or how various cultures would define play. How do children play? Where do they play? Who do they play with? Who determines if they should continue playing or stop playing? And what they began to recognize is that there are some cultural differences amongst cultures around the answers to these questions, but there's also some really striking similarities. And so they were interested in trying to tease out what are some of those similarities and how might we capitalize on them? And does that help to frame this notion of a pedagogy of play? So remember at the beginning, we mentioned that perhaps we need to think more about play as a pedagogy instead of just individual activities that we offer when we can fit it in to our daily schedule, but come at how we invest in playful learning as the fabric of how we design learning for children. So to help themselves look for those commonalities or to see if they could tease them out, the team at Harvard did some research across 4 different countries. And on the next slide, we'll see those come up. So they took a look at what does playful learning look like in schools in Denmark, South Africa, the United States, and Colombia. And they spent time in these countries, in schools, in classrooms, talking with teachers, observing. You get an idea from this chart, the massive amount of observations they conducted, the number of interviews they conducted with teachers and with school leaders, study groups or focus groups that they held. And in the course of their work, what they were trying to tease out was what were some of the cultural indicators of playful learning. that existed. And so for each of the countries, they sifted through all of the information that they were collecting and tried to organize it in a meaningful way. And so the next slide, we're going to show you what that looked like for the country of Denmark. And what you'll notice here is that the way in which play was described, how it feels, and what it looks like seem to shake out across three big ideas. One that the researchers termed wonder, one that they termed choice, and one that they termed delight. And if you take just a moment to look at some of the descriptive language around what playful learning feels like and what it looks like, you'll, I hope, notice maybe some of the qualities that earlier today, when we asked you to think about your playful learning representation and how that made you feel, that you might see some of the same qualities coming up. So the team at Harvard looked across these 4 different countries and ultimately pulled together all of that thinking into a representation, which we'll see on the next slide, where they tried to define what for them a pedagogy of play would represent. And putting together all of these different cultural indicators, what they came up with was that a playful learning pedagogy would most always involve the learners leading their learning in some fashion. So there would be an aspect of choice, ownership, autonomy to some of their learning. That there would always be opportunity to explore the unknown in some way. So curiosity, meaning-making, wonder would be represented through a playful pedagogy. And finally, that there would be an element of joy, happiness, delight, enjoyment in the learning experiences. This model that you see in front of you, you would be able to connect back to any one of the individual models that they constructed for the 4 countries that they studied. This work has become the foundation for what Harvard's Project Zero team calls the pedagogy of play. And that we're going to show you at the very end today a link. We have a QR code to it, and I'll send it out at the end of the session too. But they actually turned their work into a text called The Pedagogy of Play that is really helpful for educators to think about how you construct a playful learning culture in your school and employ a pedagogy of play as opposed to just disparate activities from time to time. And that particular text is actually what we're going to draw upon in future sessions, but also in the sessions we mentioned that we'll hold in between these gatherings. So if that interests you, that might be something that you'll want to dig into. And we'll certainly send more information later, but thought we would pique your interest a little bit with this research that is much more current. And something that we can, I think, all be taking away some key understandings from.
So we're sort of starting to see this pendulum swing back, right? As is the case in education often, right? Old and tried and true strategies go away and something takes its place. And then that new thing may or may not be working. And so we sort of go back to the old ways, right? That's sort of this idea of this pendulum swinging back in early childhood and public school classroom, elementary classrooms around initiating more play, because I think over the last few years, some of that's been taken out unintentionally, right? With the right frame of mind and wanting to try something different. But now we're sort of seeing that, well, wait a second, play is pretty important. We can't just take it out. It's not a or statement, right? It's a and. Fifth grader in Taiwan was quoted here to say that play doesn't have to be using your hands, right? Or moving around. We can also use our brains to play. If you have play in your heart, everything is fun. So we always like to share that. I'm going to zip really quickly through these next 3 slides. They're really just meant to share with you some additional research that exists. And like Leanne said, we can share these slides or the particular research with you in a separate email. But if you're curious around more current research related specifically to executive function development, then you might turn to Barker in 2014 or Diamond and Lee in 2011. They studied this idea of less structured time in children's daily lives and how that predicts self-directed executive functioning, as well as interventions that were shown to aid executive function development in children 4 to 12. So again, that sort of elementary and even into middle school time frame. So I'm not going to read these or leave them up for very long, but these are some 2 known studies specifically related to executive function. There's also a couple related directly to social behavior research from 2007, from 2013, looking at this idea of play in apes and humans. And then also thinking about the impact of pretend play. We've talked a lot about that today on child's development and sort of a review of that evidence. And if you're specifically or also curious about more research in cognitive function development, then there's some research out there from 2012 and from 2007 that talk about the importance of play on a child's cognitive development and cognitive function development, as well as the importance of play in promoting healthy child development and maintaining strong parent-child bonds, or even adult to child. So that exists as well. And I think if you are all probably very savvy and able to do some research on your own, you would come up with the plethora of TED Talks and videos and websites that also hone in on this idea around the importance of play in a young child's development. So these are just some that we've pulled for our own work. I'm going to throw this link in the slide. We're not going to play it or ask you to watch it right now, but I had mentioned earlier Dr. Gray and his research on play. And this video is of him. It's about just under 5 minutes long, talking about his definition of play. And we would charge you to think about how that might resonate with you, as well as how his definition compares to the definition or the play continuum that we provided earlier, that was pulled from 2 other resources as well. So this is a really great video. Dr. Gray is a very calm, soft-spoken man, and he just really depicts his passion around this topic. It's a wonderful video to show with other colleagues or even families to sort of depict this idea around why play is not wasted time for children. In fact, it's critical. So I would be happy to share this in the chat in just a moment and encourage you to watch it or listen to it when you have time.
All right. So we are getting close to the end of our time together today. And as a way of bringing a little bit of closure and cementing some of our thinking about playful learning in the early elementary grades and probably beyond, we are going to invite you to engage in an activity with us using a couple of sentence stems. So we'd like you to find a slip of paper, sticky note, something that you can write on, and complete these sentence starters. I used to think what about play? Now I know what about play. So jot that down for yourself. when you're feeling good about that, go ahead and type it into the chat, but don't hit send yet. In a moment, we'll give a signal, and then we're going to ask you to hit send so that we're going to populate the chat box with a whole lot of your "I used to think, now I know" statements. And if you're in a room with a lot of people, you can feel free to just pop in one from your room if you'd like, but we hope each one of you will be doing this individually. Take another 30 seconds or so to get your "I used to think, now I know" statement ready in the chat. Okay. I'm going to count backwards from 3, and when I get to 0, you can hit send. After we do that, I'm going to invite you to take just a moment to scroll, and feel free to use the reactions, emojis, to highlight some of the statements that resonate with you as well. Everybody ready? 3, 2, 1, 0.
My goodness.
Now take a little time to read what people have offered and use those emojis to go ahead and mark something that connects with you as well. I'm noticing so many amazing takeaways and ideas. Everything from that play is not just for little children, but for all of us as humans, to how our role as educators might look a little different than what we thought it might look like for play, to being better equipped to be able to talk about the why of playful learning. Give you a few more seconds to read through what people have offered. I really appreciate too the folks that have mentioned the role as a teacher of sitting back and watching and observing. That's a really important consideration and one that we will talk more about in our next couple of sessions together. What does the role of the teacher look like in creating a pedagogy of play? All right. You want to question? Sure. Okay. So we wanted to save a little bit of space today for folks who might have any questions or something they wanted to offer for discussion. So we'll pause for just a couple of minutes and feel free to pop any questions in the chat or come off mute. Just put your hand up so we can call on you. Oh, yeah. Thank you, Victoria. Definitely. Such an important aspect of play. That's great. Okay. We'll go on to our last couple slides. So as we mentioned in the very beginning, this is the first in a three-part series. And so we will be coming back together on January 16th and March 20th, and we hope that you'll be joining us. We know that you may have other workshop sessions that really intrigued you. The good thing, though, is that all of these are being recorded. So if you happen to go to something else in January or in March, just know you will be able to go back to the recorded sessions for those days. We fully anticipate some people went to some other things today who want to listen to the session that was recorded this morning. So that you can look forward to those two opportunities. What I'll also just mention about those is that we will probably, like we did this time, be asking you to gather a few materials that you can bring with you to these sessions, because our hope is to try to create some hands-on, more active learning opportunities for all of you. We know it's a lot of time to just sit and listen. So just be on the lookout for that for the next couple of sessions. In between, as we mentioned, we will be offering a text study using the text, A Pedagogy of Play, that came out of the research that we described from Harvard's Project Zero. You can use the QR code on the screen if you want to get taken directly to where this text lives online. In the email that I will hit send on momentarily, you're going to get a link to that as well. So you can access it either way. Put it in the chat box. Yes, you can purchase the text if you wanted to, but it's totally available online as a PDF. So no need to do that unless you want a hard copy of it. You could either print it out if you'd like, or just read it digitally. And it's also available as an audiobook. So that might intrigue you as well, because you could just listen. We'll send out more information about when this text study will get started, probably sometime in early November. So be looking for that.
I threw the link to that also in the chat box. So if anybody wanted to click on it there, you can access it.
Yeah. And then finally, we'd very, very much appreciate everyone completing the session feedback form, which there is a QR code on the screen. But I also just hit send on an email to all of you individually, everyone who registered for this session today. And you can find the link in that email to the feedback form. You'll also find a link that you can use to obtain contact hours for today's session. And we populated all of the links to the various videos that we mentioned, to the pedagogy of play, So you should be able to access that. And we attached today's slides for you as well. So hopefully that email is kind of one-stop shopping to all resources that we shared with you today. And with probably 30 seconds to spare, we want to thank you so much for joining us today. And we're looking forward to working together across the rest of the school year.
Thank you.
And we hope you have a lovely long weekend. You've earned
Go
it.
play.
Yes, go find some play.